If you have over $200,000 sitting stagnant in your bank, retirement account, or home equity, then you're literally losing money. On this show, you learn how to get that money working for you consistently and conservatively. Learn to grow your nest egg with your host, Shawn Winslow. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to another Multifamily Monday episode. I'm your host, Shawn Winslow, and this is the Multifamily Money Podcast. What's going on, everybody? You know the drill. Coming at you all things multifamily real estate investing on Mondays. And today, I got a really special guest and a really special show. I'm not going to take up too much time in this intro because he gives us his whole story. It's a very powerful and moving episode on, perseverance and just having a mindset of not being a victim and taking what life throws at you. And it's not what happens to you, but what happens for you. And in this episode, our guest really hits home on that. And, it's a theme of being able to be flexible. And again, take what life throws at you and hit back and keep moving forward, pivoting when you need to pivot, developing skills that can take you through your entire life and give you the confidence to tackle new challenges, because you can always fall back on those skills if need be. Not that you're going to, but just in the back of the mind, you have those skills. It's a very, very moving episode. And just, warning for those that are a little squeamish when you're talking about any type of medical procedure. We do talk about that briefly in the show, because our guest did have experience with surgery due to cancer. So just a fair warning, if you get a little squeamish on that, when we get to that, you might want to fast forward. But I would highly recommend, even if you are that way, still listen to this show, because there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And I told you I'd keep this short, and I'm probably not doing that, but this is a very powerful episode. I've heard him give this talk in person, and it was powerful then, and it was powerful hearing it again. So without further ado, here is my good friend, Brian Pitcher. Hey, Brian, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, thanks, man.
Hey, I'm excited
about
you
again.
Yeah, you too, man. The last time I saw you was in person in Dallas. It's good to see you. Good to see that smiling face again. And I'm excited about this one. We talked about this right before I hit record. And for the listeners, Brian and I are in a mastermind together. And one time he shared his story, which really moved me, because it's a story of, perseverance and not giving up and going after what you want. And by doing so, he created a wonderful life for him and his family. And so I want him to share that with others, because even if it just helps one person, I think it's totally worth it. So Brian, without further ado, let's take it from the beginning. Who is
cool.
Brian?
First, is my hair okay first?
I think it's good,
I'm totally teasing.
Maybe fluff it up a little.
Totally teasing.
You're good.
So I grew up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, went to high school there, ended up serving a Mormon mission down in Brazil, ended up in Utah after that. What most people don't know about me is that I actually was on cheerleading scholarship all the way through college. It was a great way to hang out with all the girls, be athletic, and had a great time. I ended up doing a stint with the Utah Jazz stunt team for 2 years.
Wow.
So I blew out my shoulder, which during that time, apparently I had a brain tumor and I didn't know it at that time, but it was benefiting me in a big way, because it's the same thing that Andre the Giant had, Tony Robbins has it. A bunch of other really famous big people have it, because it's called acromegaly. It's a brain tumor that causes your body to create too much human growth hormone. When you have this growth hormone, when you get it after your growth plates close, it causes you to get just wider. But if you get it before your growth plates close when you're younger, it causes you to become a giant, which is called gigantism. So Tony Robbins is the Giant, as well as Andre the Giant. But the other issue with this growth hormone, too much growth hormone, is it causes all your internal organs to grow. It causes like your heart, your liver, your kidneys, like everything gets bigger than it should, which is why Andre the Giant died of a heart attack at 43, because his heart grew faster than his heart valves could grow. And so when you get this, it's a death sentence. When you get a brain tumor like I have, it's a death sentence unless you get it dealt with and can stop the growth of it. And so for me, it was giving me a ton of extra human growth hormone while I was in college doing cheerleading. And so I was really strong. And I got accused of using steroids all the time, but just because I was so strong. But it was, as far as I was concerned, it was all natural. I mean, I was working my ass off. But to give perspective how that benefited me, when I was doing cheerleading, I could hold one girl in this hand and one girl in this hand above my head. It was called the double QP, like above my head. Weightlifting wise, I was weighing in about 175 pounds or so, and I could bench 315. I was squatting 425. I was deadlifting well over 500.
Wow.
I could power clean 250 pounds. I was really, really strong. And so when I blew out my shoulder in 2006, I quit working out. And so all of that, but it's as if I was taking steroids or that growth hormone injections while I wasn't working out. So it went to all of my joints. And so when it was going to my joints and I wasn't working out, it gave me severe arthritis in all of my joints. So like when you would walk downstairs, like most people like do one foot in front of the other, right? Well, it was as if I had 50 pounds on my back while I was walking around, except I didn't. It was 1 foot at a time. I put 1 foot and then catch up with the other one, and 1 foot and catch up with the other one. If I did one at a time, it jarred my joints so much that I would be in extreme pain. If I jumped from one step down to the floor, like most kids will do 2 or 3 and see if it hurts. But for me, with one, it would shock all my joints and it would be extremely painful. I hobbled around like I was a man in my 80s in pain. Like I just couldn't walk, but yet I wanted to push through and do snowboarding and do wakeboarding and surfing and that kind of thing. And then I'd be laid up for several days afterwards, just in pain, and I would hobble around and, so I didn't know that there was something wrong. I thought that because of all of the bodybuilding and sports that I played in college, that my joints were just hurt and arthritis and everything. And so I just thought I needed to get back in shape again and get that in. But that was that wasn't the case. So kind of backtracking a little bit. So that was I graduated from college in 2005, ended up getting married to Brandy in 2006, blew out my shoulder at the end of 2005 with the Jazz. While in 2003, I started to get my real estate license and I got into real estate, started selling a ton of homes. And I read the Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that kind of started me on that whole path of thinking differently. Mm-hmm. I knew when I was in college that I wouldn't get a degree in anything. I knew I'd get a degree, but I knew I wasn't going to use it for anything afterwards. It was just, I was having a great time. And I'm like, well, I get up when I'm having a great time. And right. I'll figure out I just needed to stay in long enough to figure out what I wanted to do. And at that time I wanted to do real estate, but I thought the way to get into real estate was as a real estate agent. So, anyway, fast forward several years, I started to do, when the market started crashing in 2008 here in Salt Lake City, where I live, I started to get into short sales. And not because I wanted to be a great agent, because I want to be an investor. And so I thought, well, if I do all the short sales, I can sell these off to investors and list it again. I want to be on the investor side of the business. And so I started marketing. I started learning to get in these different groups and get ahead of the crowd of what is going on right now, what is happening. And I would look all over the country and find out what was going on in different markets and apply it back to the one that I was at, see, where am I at compared to them? Because we were a 2-year delay but behind the Sunbelt states. So I was trying, figuring things out, and I started to flip homes as a byproduct of that. Because I would find other people doing short sales, and I was like, I'll buy your deals, dude. And I do short sales, so I understand the game you're playing. And I'll give you the commission if I just want to buy the deal. Or I would sell a property to somebody else, and then I would double end it, and I would help, or I would double end the front side and then get the listing on the back side, but I would help them line up money and whatnot. So it was a deal for me, but I wasn't actually the investor on it. And so I started doing all that, and I started to where I was, holding 50 to 60 short sale listings at any given time. And I was making more money than everybody else I knew at that time. Everybody else was going bankrupt. They were getting other jobs, but I was staying in the business. My average short sale transaction was $4,000, and I was closing about 100 deals a year. So if you could think back at that point in time, it looks like you're doing amazing from a real estate agent perspective at that time, getting 450 grand a year in commissions. But yet I had 3 assistants, 2 buyer's agents, and a short sale negotiator, and marketing to pay for it. So after it all got whittled down, it was like 150 grand.
Yeah.
Would seem like that was a great amount of money at the time, but with how much I was working and the having each of my kids cost me 50 grand out of pocket at that time. One was born in 2007, the other was born in 2010. And just with the short sale, and because I did end up with several rental properties before the crash, and I started selling everything off, ended up short selling 2 properties. I was able to keep my own house, and I was leaving for work before my kids got up, and I was coming home after they went to bed.
Yeah.
And that was the more common theme versus the rare. So I was working 16, 18 hours a day, 6 days a week, because I was negotiating all my short sales during bank hours. But then I was going on all my appointments on evenings and on the weekend. Luckily, Utah is very Mormon, very religious, so most people take Sundays off. But so luckily I had Sundays off, but I would still work Sundays too sometimes if I needed to. Anyway, what I'm getting at is I was working my 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. And in my brain, I'm using the same thought process of, I'm going to do what no one else is willing to do for 5 years so that I can live my life the way that nobody else can for the rest of my life. You ever hear that?
Yep.
That one?
Yeah,
that saying?
that one.
Okay. I think it's fucking lying. Okay. And I'm going to tell you why. For some people that might work. Okay. But what if you don't have 5 years? What if you only have 2 years left and you spent those 2 years sacrificing everything and you don't even get to the end? What if at 5 years we have a market shift and all of a sudden you got to give another 5 years to it, and that 5 years become 10 years and you miss your kids grow up in the process?
Mm-hmm.
So I now hate that statement. I understand that the intention was great with it. My rule that I go by now is I'm going to live as if I only have 2 years left, but plan as if I'll never die.
I like that.
Okay. So I want to live that way, which means that work is not the most important thing for if you're only going to live for 2 years. But work is important if you've got to have enough money to plan to live as if you'll never die. Okay. So I'm kind of pulling it all together. So in 2013, I went to my sister's wedding, and her new brother-in-law looked at me and told her, my sister said, "Your brother looks like my best friend who has a condition called acromegaly. He should go get checked out." Sure enough, I had the brain tumor that gave me acromegaly. you know, that, and it's always, you always find out, like they always usually figure it out because like dentists and orthodontists, they know what it looks like because it changes your jaw structure, because your lower jaw keeps growing when it's not supposed to. Not eye surgeons, but the guys that check your eyes, ophthalmologists, optometrists, they'll figure it out, because if you start to have issues with eyesight, it's because there's pressure being put on that optical nerve.
Okay.
So there's certain things that start to happen that will cause that. But if no one points it out, it happens so slowly, like the story of the frog in cold water that gets heated up. It gets rougher and rougher and rougher, but it's such a slow pace that you don't realize that there's something wrong. And so for me, what started happening is my hair was really oily, which happens from a growth hormone or too much growth hormone. My hands kept growing, so I have extra large hands. My nose kept growing, my eyebrows, my ears, my jaw, my bone structure just got thicker on my body, and I got whiter. And I was getting stronger until I had my injury, and then I never worked out after that, really, since then until recently. So I figured I had this brain tumor. I went in May of 2013. It was like May 30th, May 31st, and I had my first brain surgery. And I showed up to the top. I'd show up at like 7 a.m., top of the Intermountain Medical Center, looking out of the Wasatch Front mountain range. And I remember looking out on those mountains and realizing that they're going to go into my brain. They're going to go through my nose to the front of my brain to do operation. And if this doesn't go right, those mountains are the last thing I'll ever see.
Wow.
And it probably doesn't help that I watched the surgery on YouTube the night before.
Of course you did. You would.
So
that's funny.
I was like, wow, that's crazy. So I went in, had the surgery for about a month. Like as my nose is covering, because I had to spend 2 days in ICU afterwards while they're monitoring everything, because what they do is they actually cut the skin here on the nose, and they disconnect the septum and move it to the side, and that creates a highway right to the front of the brain. Wow. And they have to crack through 2 layers of skull inside. And then after they're done, they move the septum back in place, which I had a crooked septum, so that actually was a good thing. I could actually breathe a lot better.
So you had a nose job, you're telling me.
I got a nose job. I mean, it doesn't look prettier on the outside, but I can breathe better.
There you go.
And so I got it going. I could actually breathe a lot better afterwards, and it started healing up. I started to feel it a lot better. And then I started to feel like shit again. I mean, and I called my doctor, and he's like, dude, let's go get let's do another MRI. Did another MRI, and it was growing back. The tumor was growing back.
Jeez.
And he said, all right, well, let's get you scheduled for surgery again. I recommend we going into it. So the pituitary gland is kind of like a pea. Like an actual size of a pea. It's not that big, but think of a wrinkled pea and having the brain tumor grow, or the tumor grow all the way around it. And with one of those little, like, I don't know what they call it. It's a metal knife, and they use that to scrape like your teeth and whatnot, but they can go in there and pull the cells out of the little crevices in the pea. That's what they were doing inside my brain. Yeah. And they didn't want to touch the pituitary gland the first time because it causes issues. But since they were having an issue with it growing back, they're like, okay, we're going to make sure we get it all this time. And so they went in and got it all. And then I started to feel better for about a month. And then I started to really feel like shit again. So I went in and got all tested, and come to find out that it knocked my pituitary gland out of service. My pituitary gland did not work at all.
Wow.
Which meant that none of my hormones were being created. There was no thyroid. There was no testosterone. There was no growth hormone. My hair was starting to fall out. There was no, I had to pee a lot. Your pituitary gland makes another hormone called, that's actually classified as diabetes insipidus, which is type 3 diabetes, and no one knows about it. It's a hormone that tells your body to release water out of your blood. And if you don't have this hormone, your body just starts releasing water out of your blood, and then you can't stop peeing, and you feel like you're dying of thirst. I ran out of medication once, and that was a rough 3 hours. I was like, you're going to find, if we don't find a Walgreens and so forth so I can get this, you're going to take me to the ER and we're going to get this.
Wow.
There was no way I could go for very long. So the pituitary gland got knocked out. I had to go in and get tested for everything and get put back on thyroid medication, testosterone, growth hormone, prednisone, which provides cortisol for your body. So I have to monitor all these things on my own. So, but to backtrack, when I went up for the second surgery, and I was again looking at that Wasatch Front mountain range, I stood there. I was there, and I had so much anxiety because I knew what was the recovery process was going to be, and I knew that. What's the likelihood of twice going into your brain that you're not going to have an issue coming out? Mm-hmm. And I made a commitment right then and there. If I make it through this, I'm going to change my life. I am no longer going to play the game of work for 5 years like no one else will so that you can do whatever you want after that. I'm going to live as if I only have 2 years left. And I'm going to live my life and find ways to work in the cracks. Which meant that I could if I wasn't, I vowed never to work nights and weekends again. Mm-hmm. As a common thing, right? Every once in a while, you got to do what you got to do. But I was no longer willing to work nights and weekends, which meant that I had to change my career. I could no longer be a real estate agent because real estate agents always work nights and weekends.
Yep.
So I started, and so after I started recovering, and I was already doing some flips here and there, but I didn't know that you could do a lot more of that. So I was looking at different things, and I was, just asking questions. I ended up joining my first mastermind group, which was called Collective Genius. I qualified for that because of all of my short sales I did. And they ended up teaching me how to market for deals and do deals in volume, like just straight to seller. And so once I plugged into there, I had to negotiate a payment plan because I hadn't really worked in a year. And I'll be forever grateful for Jason Medley for helping me with that, working me through that. And they taught me how to be a true investor, how to stop thinking like a service-oriented real estate agent and being a solid, smart businessman as an investor. And so I started to learn how to flip homes in volume, and I started doing about roughly 40 homes a year. Wow. I would wholesale some, but I mostly rehabbed everything that I could get my hands on. And so I was doing them in Vegas and in Salt Lake area. And I was doing that for years, and I finally was able to turn in my real estate license and then and not work nights and weekends. I was finally able to get the toys, the razor and the boat, and later on the motorcycles, and take my family on vacations and actually not have to be on my phone the entire time. I was able to actually sold a deal that was an 8-plex that I made a lot of money on, and it was time to harvest it. And I told my wife, I said, all right, Brandy, I said, I'm going to give you a chunk of this money. and we can pick any vacation in the world you want to go on. And she's like, are you serious? Like, for real? Like, you're not going to say this, and then I'm going to go pick something out, and then you're going to change your mind, right? I said, no. Any vacation in the world you want to go on. And so 2 years ago, we booked a trip for last May at this time last year. And we took a 3.5 week trip to Europe and did a cruise and visited all these countries around the Mediterranean and took the kids with us. And it ignited the desire to see the world and travel and learn new cultures, try new types of foods, and see that it's a different world outside the United States. And my kids, who are now, today they're 13 and almost 16. So that was 12 and 15. So they're still young enough. They're old enough to remember it all and young enough to appreciate it and still want to be with mom and dad. So since then, we've had a goal that every time a big deal closes, that we do another trip like that. And so I just closed the biggest deal of my career a couple months ago, 2 months ago, where it was about $500,000 on one deal with no partners. It was just us. So owned it for about 1.5 years. And we're booking a trip to France to go do a castle tour.
Amazing.
We wanted to go to Egypt, but it's not safe enough to go there right now, according to the U.S. Embassy. So we're going to France, and we're doing some other things. So pretty exciting. So I guess I went forward a little bit, but the whole thing with the brain tumor was I had to change my career. I had to change the way I work and work smarter, not harder. I got into the investor realm and I started flipping a bunch of homes and making a bunch of money. But I skipped a part that I need to come back to because I think it's really important, which is my path to my path to cash flow, my path to multifamily. So I was flipping a bunch of homes, and in 2018, 2019, like everybody and their dog started to get into the game, right? Everyone thought they were, everybody was going to be a wholesaler. Everyone was flipping homes. And all of a sudden because originally when I was marketing, my average cost for a deal was $2,500. It went up to over 15 grand per deal to get it. And I'm like, this isn't worth it anymore. It's not worth it. So I tried to shift price points. I tried to do a couple of different things. And by 2019, we had an inverted yield curve. So I started to make less and less money. The inverted yield curve happened in September, October of 2019. So I knew we had a recession coming. And I could already see the writing on the wall that I had 4 different deals that I was going to lose a bunch of money on. I didn't know how much, but I knew it was going to be more than I ever lost in my career. And I knew that the type of deals I was doing wasn't working anymore. The marketing that I was doing wasn't working anymore. I had to figure something else out. So out of a little moment of weakness, I ended up getting my real estate license back, thinking that I could go sell some homes again. I learned really quickly that wasn't the right move. So after a year, I was like, okay, let's put that aside. Like, I still kept it until about 3 months ago, because I haven't done a deal in about 2 years with it anyway. I finally turned it in, but I was like, during that time, I was like, what am I going to do? Like, what I'm doing isn't working anymore. What am I going to do now? I'm like, am I going to flip homes in another market? I got to change markets? And I was like, well, if I'm going to change everything, what do I really want? Was the question I asked. What do I really want? And I was like, well, I want cash flow. I want reoccurring income for everything I do right now. And about that time, there was 2 apartments that came up on a wholesale list up just north of me, about 2.5 hours. A 16-plex and an 11-plex, 27 doors. I'm like, well, if I'm going to do cash flow, that's what I need to buy. So I bought both of them. Started rehabbing them, got it going. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all in. So I started marketing for multifamily in Pocatello, which is where I bought a ton of doors. And then I also marketed across Utah for more multifamily properties. Over the course of 2 years, I picked up 124 doors.
Wow. What was your strategy? How were you able to do that?
It was the Burr method. I was doing the Burr method on fourplex, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. I also did it on a 20plex, a 16plex, an 11plex, a 6plex. That's what I was doing. Except there was one little extra thing that I did. And I learned this from Corey with the way he structures equity on all the apartments, which is that 6 and 6 strategy.
Yeah, which is essentially like
I already had it. It's essentially like a debt, right? So what I started doing is I started putting second mortgages on all these properties, but I have 8% money and 10% money. And so I started structuring it where I split it up, 4% or 5% money I would pay quarterly. And then the other money would accrue, and I would do it for 5 years. And that allowed me to pull all my capital out of those sometimes. And I would do, I would cash flow quite a bit. They would get cash flow every quarter. And then they have a big payday on the back end that's coming out of equity. And what I found is that if I divided up that way, and I took the principal and interest payment on the first mortgage, and I had the money that was accruing on their second mortgage, as long as the second mortgage that was accruing was less than the principal pay down on the first mortgage, I turned it into an interest-only loan on a blended rate.
Yeah.
Which meant that I didn't have a negative end loan, which I didn't want.
Right.
And so, so I just have to hold on for 5 years and let it cash flow, let the value build, let everything inflate like it does. Over the course of 6 years, it'll go up by 25% with basic inflation.
Yep. And for those that aren't familiar with negative AM, that's essentially what a student loan is. It's when you pay, essentially you're paying less than what is actually owed, and then it just accrues even more over time. If you want to go into more,
I was going to say before the crash, they were doing these negative AM loans where you only had to pay a portion of the actual payment. Yeah, they had a 4-option payment plan. There was an interest-only one, and then there was a negative interest. And if you didn't pay it, then that interest got tacked on the back, and your principal balance was growing over time. And then when the real estate values crashed, that was a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what they do with student loans too, which a lot of people don't realize. And
right.
It's dangerous, scary.
But the Stafford loans.
Yeah.
But
anyways.
Although I did get my first education in real estate with student loans.
I'd love to hear that one day.
I bought my first Rich Dad Poor Dad set off of the TV for $250 with my student loan money.
I love it.
They were all CDs. I still have them.
That's smart. I love it.
So I started buying all these multifamily properties. I was doing the Burr method. I was pulling money out at the same time, and then every once in a while I'd wholesale one. And then afterwards, and then 2022 rolled around. I'd already kind of finished with as many as I could possibly do at the time. Everything I found, I bought, unless I wholesaled it. And then the rates went up, and the pricing went sky high too. So it didn't really make sense to buy anymore for a time. And so I was like, well, what do I want to do now? And so I shifted to storage units. And so last year I bought 3 storage unit facilities with a partner, and then we brought on another partner after the fact. And then we're under contract to buy another property in Florida right now that we're going through the process on. We got quite a few properties that we're looking at. So storage units, one of the things that most people don't know is that it's I forget the term for it. It's basically buying a business that happens to own real estate too. That's a special type of interest, like a mobile home park or an RV park, storage units, where the value is actually in the business, but you need the real estate to operate that business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas apartments and the value is in the building itself, regardless of who's managing it. Now, obviously, you can improve the value by management and improve the value by doing certain things, but there's more value in just the real estate itself than in the business.
Yeah, exactly.
And so 65% of all storage unit facilities right now are owned by mom and pops. And I believe that the majority of those are going to be gobbled up by people like myself and like others that I know that are buying several a year and accumulating them, and then we'll just flip them to a REIT in 5-10 years and have a big payout. But 65% of those mom and pops, most of them will be gobbled up over the next 20 years. And it'll be more like the hotel business. In the beginning, in the hotel business, they were all owned by individuals. Mm-hmm. But then big companies started acquiring and accumulating lots of hotels. And so now it's more common that a hotel is owned by a large REIT or a large corporation, large hedge fund, than a mom and pop. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we just saw the largest acquisition ever in the storage space earlier this year. Don't quote me on this, but I believe it was Extra Space who bought Public Storage, which is something like a $12 billion deal, which is massive. Yeah.
It was kind of a hostile takeover, to be honest.
Was it? I don't know.
They forced the sell. They forced it.
Oh, okay.
They're like, you don't want to sell? We're just going to take over. We're just going to buy all your
All
stock.
right. So, wow. Okay.
At least I think it was that one. I should not miss. I probably misspoke on that. So don't quote me on that. But I heard on the grapevine that they didn't have a choice.
Yeah, I could see that happening. But to your point, I think you're absolutely right, because 2-3 years ago, I remember that the stat was like 80-something% were owned by mom and pop. And now you're saying, what, 65 or whatever it is? So it's already
65%.
It's gone down like 20%.
It was in 2012 is 85%. Okay. And so every year more and more get gobbled up. And the percentage also grows because all the new ones that are being built are immediately going to hedge funds and REITs.
Yep. Yep. And those are popping up like crazy, especially they don't even look like a traditional storage anymore. Just looks like a big box that they make look a little prettier on the outside.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well,
so that's that. So I told you my story, and I've told that story a lot. I get up on stage and tell that story. So I'm not really used to questions in that. So I just kind of just told the whole thing. But what, as far as like my health journey and where that's taken me, what questions do you have there?
Well, to me, this has been like, I would say it's about being flexible. And it's about pivoting. That kind of seems like the theme of this story, right? Like, I think a lot of times people have a vision of where they want to go and they lay out some path and they get blindsided, they put blinders on and they feel that's the only way to get to that goal. Whereas it seems like in your story, you had a goal of eventually you realized the goal was spending less time in work and more time with your family, but still making the adequate income to support the type of lifestyle. But your story, instead of focusing on, flipping, some people would think that's the only way to get there. Then you went to multifamily and that served you, and then until it didn't. And then now you're in storage. So to me, I guess so it seems like a lot of people just get stuck on one thing and they feel it's the only thing. Yes, they might have some shiny object syndrome, but they still just stay committed to that one thing. What's allowed you to be able to be flexible and try new things out and also excel in those new things as well?
That's a good question. There's always waves. Like there's a wave of people that get into something and a wave of people that get out. And then there's a small percentage that they get in there and that's where they stay their whole career.
Yep.
well, the people that stay their whole career, over half the time it's a rough go. And then the other half of the time it's amazing. But I like to go where the sweet spot is in every industry during its wave. And then when it's time to switch. And I also look at it as every time that I shift, because I've had to shift every 3 to 4 years. So like I got into the real estate business in 2004 as an agent. And I was working with sphere of influence, mostly with buyers. And then 2007, 2008, I had to shift really hard. I was forced to shift. If I didn't change what I was doing, I would go bankrupt. I would be out of the game, and a lot of my friends did. So I did short sales, and I did that clear up until 2013. And I remember that at that point in time, because I could see the end coming for that game. I could see it on the wall. As soon as I was getting approval letters, and at the same time as I got approval letter on a short sale, I also got a loan modification approval letter, and my seller had to try for the modification before they would allow it to be short sold. As soon as I realized that the banks were trying to keep people in their homes instead of letting them go, I'm like, this game's over.
Yeah.
I bet like this is over. What am I going to do next? And then I went to flipping, and flipping actually lasted longer because I started in, basically 2010, and I went, and it was heavy until 2019, 2018 really. It slowed way down into 2019. But every time I know I need to shift, I try multiple things. Like in 2019, I went and tried to do some stuff in Puerto Rico. And I actually ended up buying a property in Puerto Rico. It was right on the ocean in Dorado. Great location. I was going to convert this 7-plex into a 4-plex so that I can get Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac financing on it and do Airbnb with every unit. And it was right on the ocean on 3/4 of an acre.
Wow.
I bought it for $250,000, and because it'd been hit by the hurricane. But I could not find anybody to work on it that didn't want to charge me $500,000 to $750,000 to remodel it.
Jeez.
Like after, like people, it was like I was the gringo, and I was a big target. And I'm like, dude, you guys want to charge me like $150, $200 a square foot to remodel this thing when I can go build a brand new home for $150 a square foot in Salt Lake? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. That's crazy.
No, you're not getting the job. But we did all this work. I said, I don't care. You're overcharging me. And I think that's a common trend out there in Puerto Rico, which is why nothing gets fixed, because everybody, if they're not making a grip on it every time, they'd rather not work at all.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
And so I ended up selling the property for more than I bought it for. I bought it for $240. I ended up selling it for like $267. But after closing costs and commissions and money costs, everything, I ended up down about $15,000. But I made that decision. And I sold that. It was like April 2nd of 2020.
Oh, wow.
We went to close on that. And then the title companies closed for like a week. And then they opened up for a little bit, and then we got it closed. It was a cash deal. And then they closed everything down again.
Wow.
So, and I moved all that money to Pocatello on the new apartments that we're acquiring. And so I spent a lot of time in Puerto Rico, and I realized that's not the game I want to play. In fact, I don't want to have to hop on a plane to go see my property.
Yes.
At that time, I was like, I'm not going to hop on a plane. And so that's why I focused on Pocatello, because I could get the same returns as I could in other places in the country, because that market had not cranked up yet. Apparently, I was at the very beginning of that wave. And then 2020, I was like, all right, let's pick this multifamily wave. I wanted to do big apartments, but I didn't want to go raise a ton of money at that time. I didn't feel like I could. I also didn't want to hop on a plane and travel across the country to go look at properties. I was finally getting, I just didn't want to do it, especially after that Puerto Rico issue I had with that property. And I'm like, what can I do locally? So then that's why I chose there. And I ran that I ran that gold vein until the gold vein ran out. I couldn't do any more. But at that point in time, I could really choose to do whatever. I could go flip some homes again. But, I ended up with 24 grand a month in cash flow. And then I refinanced some cash out so that we could do some vacations and go on, remodel our house and, do those kind of things, like live as if we only have 2 years left.
Yep.
Because what most people do is they grab all these properties and they're like, okay, we can spend money on this in 30 years. And I'm like, no, actually, I'm going to harvest that one right now.
Yeah. I want to do it while I can right now. Yeah.
I want to do it while I can. I want to live an amazing life, because the way I look at it is I only have 5 years left with both my kids home. So I got one kid that's going to be going to college in 3 years and another one in 5. And so I'm trying to fit as much stuff into that period of time as I can, because I'll always make money. It's like working out, and it's a skill. And once you learn the skill, you'll always make money. So I know I could always make more money later on, and I'll have a lot more time to do it later on too. Maybe I'll learn some new skills by then. Maybe I'll learn from you, Shawn.
Hey, man.
But so it's that's why I've been harvesting a few of them and taking the money now and trying to live an amazing life. And that's not what financial planners would tell me to do. But they also haven't had a brain tumor either. And they haven't had a health scare like I have either. And so we're trying to live an amazing life. And I know that this storage unit career, I think that this is going to last a decade. But it could only be 3 or 4 years until I'm on to the next thing.
Yeah. Well, that's the fun part of life.
Probably buying businesses. I'm already looking at some of those. But it would be businesses that complement the storage unit game.
Yeah.
So, anyway, life is so fun when you realize it's all a game.
It is, though. It is. And that's what I love about it. And that's why I love talking to people like you on this podcast. I love idea sharing, and, it is what's fun about life. And so it's great about this country too, that we have the opportunity to do this. What I love, man. And so it sounds like we got maybe the pitcher holding companies coming soon, where you're just buying up different companies and storage facilities.
That's possible.
I love it. No, that's great. And I think another theme of this show is that it's always good to have skills to fall back on. I'm sure that gives you confidence. Like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I could see how that gives you confidence to go try a new thing, knowing that you already have these built up skills that you could always fall back on if it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've learned the shortcuts. Like, if I want to go flip houses, I know how to market for those and get houses. And I know where to go get the money from. And it's a lot of, once you learn how to raise money to do deals, whether it's an apartment deal, actually probably, if I had to make $1 million in 1 year,
yeah, what would you do?
If I had to do that, I would go find and flip an apartment. I would go market and prospect, run the numbers on an apartment, find a buyer for it, flip it, and make $1 million. Or maybe I have to do 4 of them and get $250,000 on each one. I'd just assign those things.
Yep.
I realize that there are so many deals out there. And once people get to a certain, like, it's funny, I noticed the hustle changes. Like, once people get into commercial real estate, they hustle less.
Really?
It's weird. They hustle less. They spend more time. I'm not saying there's a problem with this. I've just noticed it's different. When in the single family game, you got guys that are out there willing to knock doors and prospect and market and network and do all these different things to try and accumulate deals. Once you start doing big deals and you only need a couple of them a year, most investors will just go to the brokers that specialize in that area and find deals from the brokers, because the brokers are hustling.
Right.
Most of the investors quit hustling and going direct to seller. There's very few investors that go direct to seller in the commercial game.
I agree with that. There's obviously there's factors, but I agree with that.
There's factors, right? And part of it is the investors like, I don't want to spend my time prospecting or marketing or taking all those calls or whatnot. I'd rather just get a full package from a broker that's already done all that work and they get paid a fee for that.
Yep.
Which in some scenarios, you're going to live an amazing life by doing that. You pay some fees, but as long as the numbers work, the numbers work. But if you can go direct to seller, if you're willing to market and prospect and go direct to seller and pull all those numbers, well, you're able to negotiate some much better terms because sometimes the brokers just get in the way.
Yeah. And less fees.
And less fees, right? Less fees. So, now, part of that is sellers don't know what their real price is. If they get something they're happy with, they're good. No different than in the single family game. Some people don't really care if they get the maximum price. It matters what's important to them. Some, like in the single family game, there are sellers like, yeah, I know I could get more if I want to list it and deal with the pain in the ass of doing that. I'd rather just, if I want a buyer that's going to buy it and they're going to buy it next week and I'm done.
Yeah.
There are some sellers like that in the commercial game as well. They don't want to jump through all those hoops. They'd rather just have it done. Or they don't have the ability to put together all the paperwork the brokers want. And so they'll never get it listed. So if they found a buyer that can work through that differently than most buyers, then you got a deal.
Yeah.
Like the one we're looking at right now in Florida, they don't have all the paperwork.
Yeah.
And that's not until we went and helped them do it that we could get our paperwork.
And that's your opportunity too, that they don't have those records, right? So they don't really know what it's valued. Yeah.
Right. Which is why we're getting on seller financing.
Oh, I love that.
Because we can't get a loan.
That's good though, right? At first it seems like, oh man, I can get a loan on this, but that's good because then you can, the only way for them to sell is seller financing and you can kind of dictate the terms. Yeah.
Right.
Have you done a lot of seller financing in the past?
A lot of it.
Yeah.
But it's always been on either single family or small multifamily, but I haven't done seller financing yet on these big deals. So we're excited to get one under our belt on this one.
Have a balloon payment on it?
Yeah. Most everybody wants to get their money in 5 years.
Yeah.
Well, they're trying for a year or two, and we're always pushing for 5.
Right. More time, the better. Figure it out. Yeah.
Well, we want enough time to be able to get 3 years of tax returns.
Yeah. So then you can go put debt on it. Yeah.
So either we're putting debt on it or we're selling it to someone who's going to put debt on it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Smart.
So,
yeah, man.
I like to catch it, like, for me, because I always when things don't go well and they're frustrated, they're losing money left and right, they're having a really rough time. Most people put their head in the sand and they feel sorry for themselves. And sometimes they'll stay there for way too long.
Yep.
I'm not saying you can't feel sorry for yourself because everyone gets kicked in the nuts every once in a while.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. But when things aren't going rough, and if it's a total economy thing, like everybody's getting kicked in the nuts, the best thing that you can do is look around and see what's going on, because there's usually an opportunity right in front of you that nobody else is seeing. And because there's still people that have to buy, there's still people that have to sell, and there's still deals that will be done regardless of the economy. And, right now there's a financing problem because the rates are so high. Well, that creates opportunities too, if you look for it, or you could, feel sorry for yourself and go put your head in the sand. So every time things get rough, I always poke my head up and I want to see what's going on in it. And like for storage units, I know for large multifamily deals, when I was looking again in 2019, because I did Corey Peterson's first Kahuna boardroom. I want to say it was 2018, right around in there, where I kind of learned, okay, here's what you look for, here's how you do it. But I wasn't ready to start doing that. And then when I was ready to start doing cash flow, I felt like I was too late to the game on that one. At least where there's a big basketball going through a garden hose. I felt like I was late. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but I feel like I was late in the wave that was coming through. And I picked, like, being in all the masterminds and seeing what everybody's doing. Everyone was doing apartments and big apartments. They're trying to find apartments. Like, okay, well, what is everyone not doing? Well, I think that the biggest opportunities right now are in mobile home parks, RV parks, and storage units.
Why do you think that? Because is that just a lot of mom and pop still concentrated there?
A lot of mom and pops.
Yeah.
And you're starting to hear more about more people doing them, but not everybody's doing them. And I think over the next 5-10 years, everyone's going to be doing storage units, mobile home parks, and RV parks.
Yeah, kind of like what's happening in multifamily.
Mm-hmm, exactly what's happening in multifamily is exactly what's going to happen with those. I remember, like, some people were wholesaling back in 2013, 2014, 2015. And then all of a sudden, everybody was a wholesaler in 2018.
Yeah. Everyone had the we buy houses signs everywhere.
Yeah, everybody. And everyone's like, are you wholesaling? Are you like, and then there was the daisy chains. But, I'm not saying that everyone's wrong in that. I'm just saying that that's not the path that I choose to take. I would rather go play a game where there's way less people. There's usually more opportunity, and sometimes you're early to the game. But I usually find if I see an opportunity somewhere, I usually figure out that I want to try to be more at the beginning of that opportunity than at the end. And if I feel like I'm at the beginning of it, I know that I have usually 3 or 4 years before it gets crowded.
Yep.
And then when it starts to get crowded, that's when I'm exiting and finding the next wave.
Yeah, easier to catch a wave when you're early.
Right.
Yeah. No, I'm with.
And if you can add a 0 or 2, that's always better too.
Oh, that's amazing. And then we can go on more trips and buy more toys, right?
Right. Exactly.
All right. Well, this has been a phenomenal episode, Brian. I don't want to take too much of your time, but before I let you go, if I could just ask one last question, kind of.
Yeah.
You've obviously been in the real estate business for a very long time. You've probably met a ton of people, seen successes, seen failures. What's kind of a common theme you've seen in people that just don't make it? And what are some things that people can do to hopefully not fall in those pitfalls?
Ooh, what do I find common that people that fail?
Yeah.
What's a common denominator for people that fail?
And then on the flip side, after you answer that, what's a common denominator of people that succeed?
Well, it's the same thing. It's limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
Like, they don't think they can do it, and so they don't. They're telling themselves the truth. They don't think they can do it, and they're right. They can't. And the only way that the best way, in my opinion, to change the belief from I can't do this or I don't know if I can do this to, oh, I can do that, is to go surround yourself with a ton of people that are doing that.
Yep.
It's all the struggle that most people have isn't actually the work. It's not actually their skill sets. Because the work can be learned, the skill sets can be learned. Experience comes from when things don't go right.
Yeah.
And you learn from that. The thing that people can't learn until they choose to is what's going on in the 6 inches between their ears.
Oh man, a lot.
Like if you're not, yeah, it's a lot, right? Well, it's all usually about the bullshit that our parents taught us. Or, well, it's not. I mean, 90% of life is about, or 10% of life happens to you, and 90% of life is the story that you created about what happened to you.
That's so true.
Right? So, all these things that happened to us as we were growing up. And it's not even about what happened. It's a story that we created on why, as Tommy Boy puts it, why I suck as a salesman.
Great movie, great reference.
Or why I'm not good enough. Why am I not good enough? Why am I such a failure in life? Why do I always fail? And part of that is our American way of our schooling. Our schooling tells you you're bad if you're not perfect.
Yeah.
Right. And you're trying to be perfect in grades. And anytime you're not perfect, you're bad and you're punished. When in reality, failure is the best motivator. It's the best learner. You learn from failure. The faster you fail, the more you learn and the more you earn. Like you need to fail fast. But most people can't get to that point because of all the stories that they tell themselves in their head. I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of what other people think. I'm afraid that I have a friend and I've talked to him about this in person, that one of the reasons why he's sabotaging himself from being successful is because when he was young, he told himself, he said that he always hated people that were rich. Mm. He hated people that were rich because he assumed that they got it by ripping people off or manipulating people or doing it in not honest ways. Well, now that he has the opportunity to become rich or wealthy, it is in a direct violation of his core belief system.
Yeah. Wow.
And so every time he does something good, he slides backwards because of that belief system. And until he changes that belief system, which he's now aware of, he's not going to be able, any money he makes, he won't keep it because of that core belief. So, I mean, learning, Tony Robbins is who really got me into the self-development and finding out what's going on up here.
Yep.
But then since then, it's been lots of, therapy and energy work and doing some of the plant-based medicine and like really trying to figure out what's going on up here and get rid of those limiting beliefs and realize that there's millions of possibilities. And everything that's ever happened to you happened for you, not to you, and find the good in it. Because everything that happened to you is good for you if you learn from it.
Right.
Regardless of what it is. So for me, it took me a little while, but now I have a firm belief. My brain tumor is the best thing that ever happened to me.
Oh, it's amazing.
Because it changed the way I view the world. And it changed the way I am with my family. It saved me from not having a relationship with my kids when they grow up.
Wow, that's powerful.
Saved me from myself. So my brain tumor is the best thing that ever happened to me.
Very powerful, man. I think that's a mic drop right there. I think we can just wrap it up right here. That's, I can't think of ending the show in a better way than that. So I just want to thank you for your time, my friend. This has been wonderful.
Okay. You're welcome, man. Good to see you, brother.
I'm good to see you. All right, everybody.
Yeah.
As always, easy doesn't pay well and instant gratification is self-destructive. So not only get out there and work hard for your money, but have it work hard for you. Then you can create an amazing life like Brian has, and we can all make this world a better place. All right, catch you on the next one.
Hey, this is Shawn Winslow. After being in the financial service industry for years and having candid conversations with good people just like you, I realized that so many of us are wanting an investment strategy that provides solid returns and consistent income without the bumps in the road. There's little known secret that your financial advisor doesn't want you to know. There is investment out there that is less volatile and the returns are stronger. Get more details by going to greenbriercg.com and clicking on the free e-report. And by the way, if this show has provided you any value, then feel free to leave an honest written review and of course share it with a friend who needs it. See you next week for another great show.